Good evening and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. And once again, EWTN's given me this wonderful privilege to join you tonight and to hear a story. And our guest tonight, Scott Weeman, is a revert to the Catholic Church. He runs a website called CatholicInRecovery.com. And that might give us a little hint about a little bit of his journey. And in fact, I invite you to pray as Scott shares his story, because we do know that especially today, with the constant voice of the internet and the social world, feeds the addictions or the addiction tendencies of so many people in a way far more than was ever the case before. And so it's a definite need dealing with the issue of all kinds of addictions, and actually some of us might be blind to the very addictions we have in our life. They might be not the most obvious ones that are out there, but there are all kinds of false gods that we let into our lives. So Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Marcus.
It's great to have you on the program.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
It's good to have you come all the way from the West Coast.
Yeah.
And enjoy this cold winter up here. We'll keep it warm in here so you can relax. Yeah. But let me get out of the way and invite you to tell us your story.
Yeah, well, my story, it starts as a cradle Catholic, growing up Catholic, participating in the church a little bit, as growing up, but being baptized as a child, receiving sacraments throughout my adolescent years, and then getting confirmed in high school.
Were your family active Catholic attenders, or?
We were back and forth, yeah, but received a lot of love from my family. A lot of opportunity, was encouraged to participate in CCD once a week as growing up as a boy. And so I had a foundation that was there, and there was a little bit there. Now, there wasn't a ton of, I didn't necessarily understand what was going on in the Mass when I was participating, and there was a little bit of a obligation that was on my part, that was just checking off boxes and doing what I was told. So then when I got a little freedom after I left home in after high school, that changed. You know, my participation with the church was not really existing at the time. And at the same time, just right around the time of my confirmation, I took my first drink and started doing drugs at the time as well.
And what age was that? That
was 17.
Okay.
Yeah, so while for the most of my childhood on the straight and narrow, surrounded by excellent friends that are still some of my best friends today, who were great influences, and in my deepest time of need were there for me. There was an appeal, or once I got the taste of both alcohol and drugs, it provided an escape for me. It provided something for me that I wasn't able to do for myself. And so while that turned from social use to addictive behavior in pretty short time, when I moved from a smaller town, Hortonville, Wisconsin, to the big city of New York, where I was going to college on a debate scholarship, was involved in policy debate throughout high school and then into college, I had this freedom that I didn't have when I was living at home, and also other things where looking for approval, looking to fit in, I found drugs and alcohol to be an easy way out of that.
So would you, as you look back, and I know you look through it through different eyes, through all your recovery, but if you look back on that, was your drawn to it biological? Was your draw to it psychological? Was it loneliness? Was it frustration with trying to figure out what you're going to do with life? And was there all those things in there?
Yeah, I would say all the above.
Okay.
Now, there's, I don't discount a biological component to addiction behavior, specifically substance abuse addiction.
Right.
However, there was an element, I think, of behavior that was there that I wanted to feel approved, feel accepted. A fear of abandonment, perhaps, that existed, and a reliable source of feeling good about myself was drugs and alcohol. It helped me fit into social situations, and like I said, in short time, that turned from just something that I relied on to help me socially to something that I really relied on in order to just get myself back to feeling okay. because in pursuit of those endeavors, alcohol and drugs, some of my other obligations, school obligations, and relationships with family and friends, as well as my participation on the college debate team, started to dwindle a little bit. So I was losing esteem by some of my misbehavior, and the only way that I could feel okay about that was to return to the source of what was at the root of my problems. It's a very insane cycle, and that's just what happens with addiction.
Well, I'm a little older than you, probably twice your age, but yeah, I am twice your age.
Okay.
And I remember when I was a kid, there were cartoons that we watched, and there would be this image of a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, whispering.
Yeah.
The voices.
Yeah.
And being brought up in the church, where you get the education and the sacramental graces, but I can't analyze this, but to not see yourselves as a child of God, to not recognize who you are, created in the image of God, to have that awakening.
Yeah.
So you don't have that constant whisper. You have the other whisper. Yeah. Which leads to all those addictions, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the voices, some literal and not, were some of the things that I was just trying to silence through drugs and alcohol. Some self-talk that was really destructive, some self-loathing, a lot of self-pity. And so alcohol and drugs were a source of relieving that. Now, again, they were also the source of that self-loathing, that self-pity.
Right. Well, that voice won't want you to know that, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said as well, kind of the two voices. What's interesting, around the same time of my confirmation, where we received the gifts of the Holy Spirit, was around the same time that I first my introduction with these other spirits, literally spirits, took place. So there's these two, you could say, spirits at battle with each other. Yeah. One seeking my attention very loudly, the other doing so a little bit silently and lovingly. But it was the promise, the allure, and the temptation of alcohol, drugs, that pulled me away from really receiving, really leaning into the grace of God and the love offered through the church.
Wow. Yeah. So you're in college in New York when all this is happening, and as you said, the very growing addiction to these things, which was causing the problem, but you were then using these to try and be a solution to the very problem. Yeah. So affecting friendships, family, and what you were called to do in college. Yeah.
And my time in New York didn't last too long. I was there 3 semesters, a year and a half, before having first my scholarship put on probation, and then lost my scholarship to attend because of bad grades. I just wasn't showing up to classes. My priorities were my social life and feeding that addictive behavior, with school and debate at a very distant second. So after that time, and actually after my freshman year, I was back home for a summer in Wisconsin, and got my first of 2 drunk driving citations at 19 years old. It wasn't enough of a warning to me to act upon making changes. At that time in my life, a lot of the people that were around me my age were also participating in the same kind of behavior. College, at least the people that I was surrounding myself with were drinking, sometimes using drugs in the same manner that I was. The difference was they could put it down for a little while when they needed to get their things done. I had a hard time with that. And I continually went back to the source of what was ailing me. Yeah.
Sometimes, is this true of your experience, that sometimes one of the misunderstandings in that group of support network is that it wasn't that what you were doing was wrong. What was wrong is you got caught.
Yeah. So that's a lot of my behavior there's a span of 9 years from when I first took my first drink to at least to this day when I took my last, where a lot of my change in behavior was not changing the actual behavior itself. It was just doing a better job of not getting caught, which is short-sighted and is very self-centered in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, a lot of my behavior that was in pursuit of alcohol and drugs really did have an effect on relationships. My relationship with others, those close to me, some family, friends, loved ones, as well as my relationship with myself, and certainly my relationship with God.
Yeah.
So I just, for my solution for a while was just next time, don't get caught. Do a better job of deceiving others or manipulating situations. Really, it was just an attempt to be in control when I felt like I was losing control of everything in my life.
Yeah, and these particular addictions are really affecting you at the very core of your ability to have wisdom.
Yeah.
You're getting cloudy thinking.
Yeah.
And that just keeps adding up and adding up. And then when you start feeling better the next afternoon, you need it again, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So walk us through it again. So
I moved back home after 3 semesters at college, and depressed. Really had a hard time with accepting even the fact that I wasn't going to be going back to college. Having a hard time, how would others view me in this situation? A kid with promise who has lost a great opportunity, really battling a lot of image issues, identity, and so feeling depressed. That wasn't helped by the fact that drugs and alcohol were my relief from that depression. I was kind of self-medicating in that way. And so went through a period of time where I was working, I was trying to get back into school, doing okay at times. I had gotten my second drunk driving citation when I was 21, and after that, actually went into a 15-day treatment center, where after my participation there, stayed sober for about 8 months, but really just on a, what we would say, white-knuckling approach. I wasn't doing anything to maintain a spiritual relationship with anything or God.
Had you gone back to church when you returned to Wisconsin?
Not really.
Yeah.
No, I was really just trying to just manage myself, manage situations a little bit better, rather than really see that my will. I was trying to exert my will more and more, and I was blind to the fact that it was my will, and being so sure of myself, really in a prideful way, that kept me distant from God. Yeah. That kept me from the church, from really participating in God's grace.
Yeah. Again, that voice, the lying voice that's always there making you, you're doing fine, you're doing fine, you're getting it together. Yeah. You're getting it together, just keep it, don't listen to those folk over there, you're doing just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So I fell in love with a woman who was actually a very devout Catholic, and from a family that was they had something that I hadn't seen before, and it was really beautiful, something that I kind of wanted for myself. Wasn't necessarily willing to go to the lengths to get it, but a family that was truly devoted to Christ, prayed together, and being a part of that it really meant a lot to me and provided an example for me. That was a relationship that then it kind of became my idol, my God, and so that relationship was on and off due to a lot of my behavior, deceit. I was still drinking and doing drugs, but behind her back, and causing her a lot of pain through that. And we moved to San Diego then when I was 25 years old, 2010, thinking that have we made a physical or geographic change, at least this was my idea, that that all the problems would be left behind. Unfortunately, the problem was me. I like to liken that to changing seats on the Titanic and thinking that you're not gonna go down with the ship. So that happens. I was living in San Diego for about a year, and she had just had enough of the lying, the betrayal, and was very patient, very loving, but for good reason had to let go of me. And that was hard for me. That was painful. Something that I had gone through, but this time it was it. And
our guest is Scott Weeman, and for those of you on the radio, he has a website, CatholicInRecovery.com. So what you're saying, is this right, is that with all the problems you're doing, you put this woman and this family in the place as the solution. Yeah,
I thought that I could perhaps find God, not directly, but through some kind of transference of grace or something that you might say.
But you were attracted to their faithfulness.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I also don't I don't discount the fact that a lot of prayers were said on my behalf, and that had a big significant impact on the freedom that I found then moving forward. Even unfortunately, though, they weren't able to necessarily participate in the recovery process for reasons that were important.
I completely agree with, after all the years I've done this program, that the most important thing that was happening in your life were those baptismal graces, the confirmation graces, the prayers of your family, prayers of your friend. All that grace was just waiting for God's timing, as well as your own willingness to cooperate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she says, I've had enough out in California.
Yeah, I've had enough. There was one moment, about a month and a half went by, where I was just in full self-pity mode. Had lost some of the other friendships that I had there as well. And so was alone, was isolated. My only freedom, I thought, came from the bottle and the isolation and loneliness that I put myself through. And about, one day she actually came over and found me in this state of kind of just belligerence, and looked me in the eye and said, "You are hopeless. You're never going to change." And I felt that. I kind of believed that. There was not really a solution. I knew I needed to change. I didn't believe that it was possible. I was relying on alcohol and drugs so much. However, that next day, I actually took a little stroll on my beach cruiser through the Mission Bay area of San Diego, pushed my bike through the heavy sand and just kind of collapsed on the sand there and just said, I need help. And so I pulled out my phone, I called my mom, my dad, and a few of my closest friends from back home that day, and I said, I'm in a lot of trouble and I need help. And since that day, I haven't had a drink or a drug since. It's a beautiful thing.
So it wasn't at this point in time a recovery program, that it was the grace of God and the support network of your family and friends that helped you move forward at that point.
That at least helped me believe that I could move forward. Yeah. It was then the next day from that that I, got involved with a recovery group. Fellow men and women, who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and who could relate to what I was going through. Although were kind of laughing about some of the things that were killing me in the way that we communicated those things, which at first I was a little bit shocked by. I was like, can these people really relate to what I'm going through? They had, instead of being a victim of their condition, through God's grace, been victorious. And so that was very appealing to me. Something that I wanted for myself, and was willing to go to any length to get it.
So were you working then in San Diego?
Yeah, I was working at a restaurant. So I was working a couple nights a week at a restaurant. That really gave me a great opportunity to focus on my recovery, especially in the early months. There was a man who I met very early on that became a spiritual guide to me, and he had plenty of time as well, and was very passionate about recovery. Also taught me and really introduced me to Scripture. And he had this Bible that was earmarked and written in and highlighted throughout. And I saw it, I was like, did you actually read that whole thing? It was shocking to me. I had this large Bible that my mom had given me at confirmation, and I'd taken that. I've kept that with me as I've moved through from coast to coast, and but it always just I just always saw it as something that crack open every now and then, but more or less was just kind of a coffee table item. But
where you begin with it?
Yeah,
where do you open to start?
I don't know. So he actually, as we spent many hours a day, each morning getting coffee and talking about the condition that we shared, as well as God's presence in our lives through Scripture, about also some of the psychological sides of recovery and addiction. We spent hours and hours, sometimes to the point, I didn't have too much going on in my life at the time, other than some work obligations at night, and it was emotionally it was very deep. And so it was, sometimes after sitting together for coffee for a few hours, I'd be like, I wanted to, but I couldn't be like, okay, Michael, well, I got somewhere to be. He knew I didn't have a whole lot going on at the time. And so, which gave us a great opportunity to get together and just talk about faith, about addiction, about recovery, and really about, God seeing me as a beloved son of His.
Do you look back on a time in that when there was a moment or an experience or something where you had an awakening You know what I'm saying? That you really began to have this grace working through your mind and heart to really see that there's hope for you.
Yeah. I would say that was something that gradually took place.
Yeah.
There are some that have a very white light style awakening. Right. There are others where that comes a little bit slower. That was my experience. While at the same time that I was beginning to get involved in recovery, addiction recovery, I also started getting involved with the Catholic Church, a local Catholic church, St. Bridget's Parish in San Diego, where I'm still a parishioner today, and which also has a great young adult community, something that was a foreign idea to me at the time, and because I didn't know a ton of young adults, young people my age that were involved in the parish or in the church life. So, and I got to also be honest, this was also partly an attempt to get my ex-girlfriend back. So, my involvement in the early stages of the church was just to be a good Catholic boy, at least long enough where I could put on the facade of, this is my resume now. I've been involved in the church for a month and a half. Will you take me back? So I think if I were to say that there was an awakening, it was probably when that transition took place for, I'm doing this not so that I might be able to get some other ends, but because I've fallen in love with Jesus and I've met him and he's met me, much like the father of the prodigal son comes running towards his son. I found that God was doing that with me. And that was something that I didn't want to let go of. It was something that I had it really changed my life. There was also around the same time the kind of mental attachment, or the in the brain. There's something that takes place for an addict. There's a mental obsession that takes place that when we're relying on alcohol and drugs as our source of relief, it's hard to break that mental obsession. So those first couple of days and weeks were very difficult for me because I was, obsessing about the idea that alcohol and drugs could be a very easy solution for me here. When that obsession was lifted, that was also a great gift, and I would say a source of awakening for me.
Because there's an inner battle that goes on, right? Even when you seem like you're fighting with yourself, when you decide, I don't want to drink, and then there's always the rationale that says it's okay. I mean, all that goes on, and you're wondering, who am I talking to here?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's going on inside, and that's the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all there, those voices. Yeah,
spiritual battle that takes place between my ears. And you alluded to it a little bit before. Before I had found recovery, most of my, many of my days looked like waking up in the morning, swearing off drinking because I had drank the night before, till wee hours, almost to a blackout. And so I'm not going to do this today. This is the day that my life is going to make change. And then around noon, after getting hydrated, getting some coffee and me, getting some things done, I tell myself maybe that was a little bit of an overreaction. And then that mental obsession comes back, and each day looks like the next, with tomorrow being the day that might bring change or bring new hope.
Yeah. For you, then the big awakening was, I'm not just doing this to get this girl back. Is that way? I'm getting it to get myself back.
Yeah. Yeah. And falling in love with God. And I didn't have a relationship with Jesus at the time. There were a few people that I met in that young adult group and in the parish that really did. They had something that was attractive, just like those who had found recovery had what I wanted. There were a few people who were great friends, still are great friends, that mentored me through the way, and were there to answer questions and just provide a great example of what a Catholic man is. What it is to be to really rely on the love of God through prayer, through Scripture, through the sacramental life of the Church, and other great gifts that He gives us.
Yeah, I was wondering if all those seeds planted way back with your training, were they now coming alive for you at this point, to understand what it was you were taught way back then that just kind of got stuck away back in your mind?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't lost.
All right. So talk about, again, if you would, this awakening to the Catholic Church. Were you realizing that the sacraments themselves had a really big part to play in this journey forward for you?
Yeah. this happened where I was getting involved with the church. I was getting involved with a Bible study that took place, a young adult Bible study, which boasts an attendance now of about 50 to 100 people a night, and found that I wasn't alone in this process. I was also seeing some others who were making an adult and a voluntary choice to become a member of the church through RCIA and other programs, and was in some ways envious of that. You know, I didn't necessarily make a voluntary choice to become Catholic when I was growing up or in my teenage years. I did, but a lot of it was something that I was just going through motions. Right. And I was almost, like I said, envious of them participating in this sacramental beauty. And it wasn't until a little bit while after that that I got to see that what I was doing in my recovery was very parallel to what was going on in the sacramental life of the church. Finding, really surrendering myself to the care and the love of God in relation to my alcoholism and drug addiction, and then making a list of those things, kind of like a preparation for a reconciliation, and then sharing, what it was part of me with God, myself, and another human being, namely a priest, making amends for those things, just like doing penance. And then doing those things that align me with the beauty and the love of Jesus on a daily basis, much like our daily bread or the Eucharist does. So that was a nice revelation as well, to see that, these two bodies, these two fellowships, both recovery and the beauty of the nature of the Catholic Church, were operating in the same way, maybe using some different language and reaching some different people, but it was a beautiful thing and really nurtured my personal relationship with Christ.
Yeah, the great parallels in the interconnectivity of the recovery programs and the Christian faith, particularly the sacramental Catholic faith, they're so interconnected here, but often the very people that need to have that assistance in recovery want nothing to do with the Christian faith. Yeah. And so, the work of the Spirit is that the Spirit's there working in the recovery programs, but we have to connect with people to move them forward before they discover really what it's all about. Yeah,
I would say it works both ways too. I think that there's a little bit of a distaste for some ideas or perceptions of what recovery looks like as well. And I had that. I had some experience, a little bit of experience with both recovery and the church that was somewhat distasteful at the beginning. And I had to realize that I was basing my image of the church and who God was by what I was, not about. I wasn't viewing myself based on who God was. I was viewing God in my image, and my image of myself at the time was broken, very broken. Yeah. And when I started turning that around and viewing myself in God's image, I was able to see really the beautiful nature and constant support, even through my sinfulness and recklessness, and that pursuit that God had for me was beautiful.
All right, Scott, let's pause there. We'll take a break. Our guest is Scott Weeman. Again, he's the author of a website called CatholicInRecovery.com, and we'll return with Scott in just a moment. See you in a bit. Welcome back. We have a fine guest on our program tonight. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host, and our guest is Scott Weeman. And we'll get to talking about his website, CatholicInRecovery.com. But we want to pick up a couple things on the story. And as the guest might see, you got a wedding band on your ring, on your finger, and we were just wondering, well, it's continuation of the story. Did you get back with your old girlfriend, or what happened in the journey?
Yeah, I did not. And in the same young adult group at my parish, found and fell in love with a woman who's now my wife, Jacqueline. We got married about 5 months ago. And really someone who has been incredibly supportive of the path that I'm on from day one. And it was something, as I started getting into relationships, romantic relationships, it was something that was difficult for me. It was a little bit, am I bringing a lot of baggage to the table? And how do I reveal this, what I kind of was not really a secret, I was pretty open about where I had come from, and really because my relationship with Jesus was so much contingent upon the grace and the healing that I received from my addiction recovery. But how do I bring balance to that and not throw too much out at once? So when my wife Jacqueline and I started dating, that was all thrown on the table pretty quickly, and she was incredibly supportive, even with some of the other insecurities that I had, and due to my attempts and failures at getting a degree early in my 20s. I wasn't necessarily in a place in a professional, my professional life where I would like to be, and so I had some insecurities about that, and was just trying to get back into school, and she was very supportive of all that, and it really let me know that it wasn't any kind of success of mine that attracted to her, or lack thereof, that attracted her to me, but rather just who I was, and she's taught me a lot. She's taught me a lot about love, really a beautiful thing, sacrament of marriage. And as I was getting to know her, seeing a tangible Jesus in her face and in her eyes, and
I think you mentioned she's herself as a convert? Or?
Yeah, she from a Catholic family, but didn't make the decision to become Catholic until her mid to late 20s, and so had that went through a stage where she was worshiping in a Protestant church, but then was being called and being tugged to the Catholic Church, and it's been beautiful to experience the journey together, and she's been a great blessing in my life.
Well, the returning to the church from a Catholic childhood, were there hard things to accept again when you came back to the church because of your childhood in the Catholic Church? Were there barriers to kind of giving yourself fully to the Catholic faith?
Yeah, there were some issues. There was a man named Brock who was a great friend of mine from the start, and really helped bring me into the church, and was there to support me, be a friend, but also answer questions that I had, and was very much a mentor of mine. And so there were some topics that I didn't really want to get into right away. What was my sex life going to look like as a Catholic, or different things like that. So we stayed away from those for a little while, but eventually got into the beauty of it. And luckily, I had been to such a dark place that I was very open to whatever might come my way and whatever was asked of me. And I found that beauty and really truth in the church. So I wasn't going to question too much. I was just trying to stay open. And the more I can do that today, the more open I can be, the better.
One verse I know I've quoted many times on this program, but especially when I hear stories like yours, journeys like yours, Paul says in 2 Corinthians, blessed be the God, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. As we share abundantly in Christ's suffering, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. And what that always reminds me of is sometimes God allows us to go through darkness so we can help others caught in that darkness.
Yeah.
Would that connect with your journey?
Absolutely. That is what brings everything together. That is the love that I received from others in recovery, and the opportunities for recovery that I get when helping others. And so what I was very ashamed of, my dark past, I saw and was told first, but then started to realize and experience that could be a great asset in helping others. And helping others identify with where they were. And it was certainly in others being able to identify with what I was going through, being able to look me in the eye, say, I know what you're going through, it's going to be okay, is a great gift, that shared experience. And so, I would say that it's been really a beautiful gift and an opportunity to help others, because one of the tenets of recovery, of 12-step recovery, is the idea that we can't do it alone, and that when one man or woman is helping another man or woman recover, that he or she is doing exactly that same thing for him or herself.
That's that comfort
Yeah.
that we've received from God, and now we can share it from others.
Yeah.
We've experienced what they're going through. How do you help people who do not believe they need help?
That's a difficult thing. And, I think that the best thing that I can do is just share my experience, strength, and hope with others. It's hard to diagnose someone else.
Yeah.
I know for a long time I knew that drugs and alcohol had a negative effect on my life. I was blinded to the fact that I couldn't manage the behavior around drugs and alcohol. But I didn't want to be told what to do. It was when others shared what they had been through, and then what happened in their life, the transition that took place, and what their life is like now, it seemed to be the greatest way for me to find hope. And so that's, as I approach helping others, especially on a one-on-one basis, my approach isn't so much geared towards telling him, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. But this is what I've done, this is what others have done, and I might strongly recommend some things, but only in a loving way.
But we're all different.
We are.
Everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah.
God works with us differently, as different as our fingerprints.
Yeah.
So there is no one method that's going to help with everyone, except maybe love and acceptance, and
that's right.
the importance of humility, admitting, hey, I don't have it all together.
That's right. I don't have all the answers. And I think that we talk about, my story, a lot about substance abuse, alcoholism, and drug addiction. There are a lot of other addictions that plague our society, really tear at the fabric of our culture. Pornography and sex addiction, gambling, some food-related addictions, disorders, and other things. I think that those are all things, largely symptoms of a very similar condition. And that's seeking something greater than ourselves, seeking something that is looking for meaning in our lives. And I believe that my experience and the experience of others tells me that the solution to that is largely different for everybody, but also very similar, in finding purpose and meaning, first in relationship with the higher power, with God, and doing so through the sacramental life of the Catholic Church, as well as finding meaning through being able to use our experiences to help others. And the 12 steps of recovery outlines that a lot. And I know a lot of healing has taken place in a variety of different addictions, and has used those same tenets.
Yeah, I saw a commercial on television recently. The commercial was for a company that sells technologies. And frankly, I can't remember the name of the company. I'm just not trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
But the commercial began with the voice of a young woman saying that I can no longer entertain myself apart from my technologies.
Yeah.
And that statement was used positively by that technological company to sell technologies. And when you think about that, I can no longer entertain myself apart from my technologies, that person has lost the ability to set the technologies aside to go back and entertain herself the way people used to entertain themselves before these technologies.
Yeah.
We're losing that, and that's what an addiction does.
Yeah.
Whether it's alcohol, drugs, or just our stuff.
Yeah.
That we lose the simplicity and detachment of that.
That's right. It strains relationships. Addiction strains relationships. And in my case, it isolated me a lot. And, relationships relating to others, to ourselves, and to God. And, there's it's amazing. I catch myself in that in regards to technology sometimes, and I'm certain that there are others that do the same, and that, just the almost behavioral way that we perhaps open our phone, go to certain things, perhaps it's social media or other things, and sometimes I catch myself, and there's got to be so much more meaning to life than just this back and forth, strained technological relationship that I have with the world.
Yeah.
And the beauty in my experience of recovery and in participating in the life of the church has been relationship, has been building and forming relationships that are centered not so much on just this is, here's the beautiful side of me, but rather starting with, here's where I'm weak, and identifying with each other's weaknesses so that we may unify and find victory.
Yeah. We've just, we're in the midst of the anniversary in America of our national parks. And you're near one of the earliest of the national parks. And I was recently reading through John Muir's writings, who was the founder, or the first that got the national parks going. And you read his writings about, walking in the wilderness and, being in love with the birds and the trees, but always seeing them as the fingerprints of God, the evidence of God, seeing it in creation. He wasn't worshiping creation, but he was recognizing God behind it all. But how blind are people today from any of that because of these technologies? Yeah. They can't even go for a walk and see the beauty. They don't look up anymore and see the beauty. And there's the addictions that they distract us from the things that really feed us, because we're being fed by these other things, these false gods. Yeah. Is that what you deal with in your CatholicInRecovery.com?
Some of that, yeah. So as part of my response to the call that God's given me in not only giving back just a fraction of what I've been given freely to others that I meet through recovery circles, but also through my apostolate Catholic in Recovery, which is a nonprofit organization that functions both on a website level and also in relationship with parishes and other communities. Yeah. So when I was reconciling, the beauty and the overlap between the Catholic Church, the sacramental life of the Church, and 12-step recovery, there wasn't a ton of literature, much available, that spoke to that. And what began as just me writing a blog and sharing some of my experience turned into a call to offer more than that. So now the website, CatholicInRecovery.com, offers a community forum, which we actually just launched, but offers a community forum where others can find answers, encouragement, prayer, support, and accountability through whatever they might be going through, whatever type of addictive behavior that might ail them. And in addition, also offering parish and community alliances where we work with them to help parishes and communities minister to those in their community that are suffering from alcoholism, drug addiction, and other psychological dependencies, other addictions.
I was going to say, sadly, we, in our churches, don't often provide an atmosphere of welcome to people that are caught up in problems. It should be the very place for them to be, but that's often the place if they're divorce or other breakdowns in their lives, they don't feel like they belong anymore.
Yeah. So that was one of the things when I entered back into the church that I was hesitant. I thought I was going to find resistance. I didn't belong, or I didn't meet some kind of holy obligations to step foot in the church. And when I was greeted with welcome and mercy and all that wasn't that, it was beautiful. And I was shocked, really. I was shocked. And, Christ says, I did not come into the world for the healthy, but rather came to heal the sick. And even our Pope Francis says the church should be a field hospital for those in need. And some parishes and some communities do a better job than others. But there is, I think, a little bit of improvement that can be made as far as welcoming those that are in need of help, that are in need of mercy. And part of it is a cultural thing, too. I think that, we want to show up on Sundays or wherever our participation in the church is, looking good and, giving the impression we got it all under control. It's kind of a cultural thing. But in fact, when we come and we meet Jesus, and we meet others through Jesus, I think that breaking down those walls and being genuine is a really important way to build genuine and quality relationships with others and with Christ.
Well, the title of your website says it all, Catholic in Recovery.
Yeah.
You haven't arrived yet, right?
No, and the day I do is not going to be a good day.
The day you think you've arrived.
Yes, that's right.
Is when we're in danger.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, that's wonderful. We have an email. Diane from Michigan writes, my son has been doing drugs ever since he was a teenager. He's not quite at the point where he wants to seek help, but I'm constantly praying that he will soon. Mm-hmm. If he reaches out to me, what can I offer him in the way of help or encouragement? Also, is there any particular Catholic devotion that would be applicable for this situation, or saint I should ask for their intercession as I pray for my son's needs?
That's the number one question that I typically get, and is a very, very difficult question. You know, the first thing I think is it's important to acknowledge how difficult it is for a loved one to see another, whether it's a son, a significant other, a daughter, a brother or sister, a parent, dealing with substance abuse addiction or other dependencies. So it's not an easy plight, and there's certainly a cross to bear there. Prayer, I think, is the most important thing. As I mentioned in my story, you know, I was basically brought to Jesus like the paralytic was, based on the faith of others, and you know, the faith of them, I think, really helped save me. Now, offering support and encouragement and love in a way that also has some boundaries to it. I think that it's important to love unceasingly, but with boundaries, is an important aspect of loving and caring for a loved one who's dealing with drug addiction, alcoholism, and other things. A devotion to Saint Monica is, I strongly recommend it. You know, this is a woman, the mother of Saint Augustine, who for years and years lived, you know, with a son, husband, who were battling all sorts of different, I think, addictive behaviors and belligerence in their own right. And through a lot of patience, a lot of kindness, a lot of prayers and love, and still boundaries. You know, she wasn't meek, but rather did what she had to do to care for herself and found others at the same time. I strongly recommend a relationship with Saint Monica. Someone who, in my recovery, and even as I try to reconcile my relationship and the harm that's taken place with my family members, you know, there's still a healing process there. She's been someone that I've leaned on heavily.
Because of where you've come from, you can give us a glimpse from behind the facade. Because often when people trying to help someone, that person puts on a huge facade, anger, belligerence, and it's easy for us to give up. Yeah. You know, it's a stone wall, but does stuff get through? There's the question is, does it get through even when the facade is there that looks like there's nothing getting through at all?
I think so, yeah. There's all sorts of acts of love stick, and those look like a myriad of different ways. There's not a single solution to deliver love to someone, but I truly believe that love doesn't just bounce off, that's received, even if it doesn't look to be received whatsoever. You know, the nature of alcoholism, drug addiction, and other addictions is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it's a force that can't be underestimated.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, in this morning's daily office readings from Ignatius of Antioch, he talks about our walk with Christ begins with faith and ends with love.
Yeah,
it begins with faith. It must continue to grow in love. It has to do that. Otherwise, it isn't true faith. And that love is standing by somebody, sticking with them, even when they want nothing to do with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another email, Zachary from Youngstown, Ohio, writes, what does Scott think are the best ways for someone struggling with alcoholism to move beyond their dependence on drinking and heal? What would be one or two specific things a person can do to begin turning their life around?
A couple things that I think that fellowship is largely important. You can't do it alone. I couldn't do it alone, and I still can't do it alone. So finding others who have struggled and found freedom from similar issues. In the case of drugs or alcohol, find others who are recovering alcoholics or drug addicts and find out what they're doing. At the same time, I think that accountability is important. For me, that was, I took a chance. I wasn't sure what I was going to get myself into, but when I collapsed in the sand that day, and made phone calls to some close friends and parents, I told them, and I don't know where I got this from, but that I was going to call them every day and let them know that I hadn't drank that day or the night before, hopefully. Yeah. And in just that small, even though, it's okay, you don't have to answer every day, I'll just leave a voicemail or something like that. But accountability for me was very important. I think for others, especially those who have been through a period of time of recklessness or alcoholism and drug dependence, there's very little accountability there. So those small things that are both honest and willing to do the will of something or someone else helps a lot.
As you're describing that again, something jumps out at me, and you've already said it, but you compared it to the prodigal son who's pictured behind you in that wonderful. In the story of the prodigal son, he was convinced that he wouldn't be accepted. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go back even if I'm just a slave. Yeah. Because he knew where the answer was home. But you were on the beach and the channels were still open. Yeah. I mean, they had not been closed to you. You knew you could make the call. What a blessing that was.
Yeah, it was. I owe a lot to the people that picked up the phone that day, to my family who have continued to support me through this journey, and for those that I've met along the way as well. I'm not any different from the millions of people who have found hope and new life through the process of addiction recovery, but hope to share hope with those who are struggling or who have a loved one that are finding themselves in the darkness that is dependency and addiction. God is good.
Has confession been a help?
Yeah,
the sacrament for you particularly.
Yeah, the entire process of confession, the process of preparing for confession, getting honest and willing to look at myself and what are the things that are keeping me back from the relationship with Christ or others. And then the honest discussion, the honest sharing of those defects of character, you could say, asking God to remove them. If I go into confession and I think that myself, just because I'm confessing, then automatically can heal myself of then I'm stuck in the same pride that I probably confessed in that confessional. And then making a tangible penance and doing what is right and just to rectify whatever my behavior had left, whatever kind of damage my behavior in the past has left.
When I look back on your change there in the sand, was it a quelling of a voice within that allowed you to put it aside? Was it a strengthening of your will? As you work in your recovery program, I know there's different theologies out there, philosophies on this, but is it a both and? Yeah.
I would say perhaps a both and, but I like to say that the more I pursue God's will and am willing to let go of my own will, the healthier I am and the healthier my relationships are. So it wasn't, I had tried for years to strengthen my will, and that only left me disappointed and left others certainly distraught. And so when I came to believe that I could no longer operate trying to exert my will more and more, that I wasn't the director of my own life, that brought not only new life, but also just an abundance of mystery. Like, what will the day bring today? I'm trying not to run my life on my own terms, but rather be open to the will of God. And that's brought, my ministry has come from that, my relationships have come from that.
Your marriage.
It's all something that 5.5 years ago I wouldn't have imagined. Sitting here having this conversation with you, and it's beautiful. Had all the things taken place, even sober, that I thought were necessary for me to be happy, had all those things taken place, I don't think my life would be as fruitful, nor would the relation. I mean, that's me playing God.
Yeah.
And so when I let go of my will and let God's will be done, that's when things are okay.
Yeah, one of the most beautiful, enigmatic statements in the New Testament is when John the Baptist says, "He must increase, I must decrease." And
Yeah.
the world does not understand that, but that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thank you, Marcus. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Scott Weeman, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, I hope that if there are people out there, especially in need of hope, that they might turn to CatholicInRecovery.com and get connected with you. So God bless you in your apostolate.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Journey Home. Once again, I pray that Scott's journey is an encouragement to you. God bless you. See you next week.